I've been asked a lot now, what is it with the sales untraining thing? Why in the world do you think that sales training isn't working? It's not effective. And so I begin to explain that it's not the topics, it's not the talent of the person doing the training. Well, actually, sometimes it is, but typically not. But the problem is underlying causes. It's the way we do it. It's the way we go about it. It's the things that we fail to address. And by the way, the evidence is overwhelming. And people look at me and they scratch their head and they're like, I don't get it. And then I tell them this, it's the exact same reason that leadership training falls short. And I'll explain that coming up next. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Hey, welcome to Sales Untraining, your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. Have you started down that road yet? Have you started the rewiring process? Well, I certainly hope so. And I certainly hope you will both like and subscribe to the podcast. And by the way, share it with someone. Find someone that you think would be interested in the conversation. Make sure they're aware of it. Love to get the feedback and to get people involved in this conversation. By the way, speaking of feedback, a lot of great feedback, a lot of great questions that I hear over and over. In fact, one of those questions I want to talk about in this specific episode of Sales and Training because I get it a lot. And people, they look at me and they go, what are you talking about? What do you mean sales training doesn't work? I mean, clearly we have to train our salespeople, so I don't think I'm following you. And I go, yeah, we do have to train our salespeople. Clearly they need to be more effective at what they're doing, and therein lies the problem. They're just not all that effective. And it's not me saying so. This is not some contrarian viewpoint designed to get people to subscribe to a podcast. I mean, this is reality. 5-6% of all salespeople are considered to be elite, according to surveys of over 2 million salespeople, Objective Management Group. Win rates hover 15-20%. I mean, it's terrible. No decisions can be upwards of 30%, as can, by the way, turnover in the sales department. I mean, when you start looking at all the data that's out there and people routinely not hitting their objectives, I mean, almost 50% of salespeople don't hit their revenue objectives as reported every year, somewhere in the mid to high 40%. Tell me, what department in your company would you accept that kind of failure? I mean, would you not look at that kind of failure on a production floor or in finance or operations or shipping, payroll? Wouldn't you look at it and go, hey, something needs to change? And clearly one of the issues when it comes to this is, we can have an entire sales department or company make it over the finish line. Hey, we hit our revenue objective as a team, and have 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 salespeople who did not hit their revenue objective, and they get a pass because, after all, we did make it, and turnover is a problem, and we don't want to have to go through the hassle of hiring and onboarding and training salespeople. And how much money are you leaving on the table because you allow that to exist? Well, these are all the challenges that exist. So people finally go, yeah, but so why is this a problem? I mean, not why is it a problem, but why is it occurring? And I go, well, these are systemic issues. And people look at me like, I've got 3 heads. It's the underlying root causes. It's the way we train. It's the issues we don't address in training. It's the sequence and the methodologies that we use. We actually set salespeople up to fail unwittingly. We don't even know it. I mean, think about this one really simple concept. People don't like salespeople. No, I'm not making that up. They just don't. Listen, I've been doing this more than 4 decades. I don't like salespeople, generally speaking. Oh, I love the good ones, the trusted advisors, the consultants, the people who come into my business and help my business improve. Sure. But the average salesperson, mean, talk to anybody and say, what do you don't like about salespeople? Just tell me what you don't like about them. Oh, they talk too much and they don't listen and they don't know my business and they're only there to make a sale and on it goes, right? How is that happening? Now, you're tempted to say, well, that's easy. I mean, people just don't want to part with their money. Not true. Absolutely not true in business. Business people are happy to invest in things that will positively impact their business. It's how salespeople go about doing it. And so, while I tend to think that maybe I'm making some progress, I keep getting the question. And so people will say, well, I mean, can you give me an analogy? And I say, yes, I can. In fact, I can give you a great analogy. It's the same challenge that exists with leadership training. I don't know if that helps or not. Oh, yeah. I've been doing what I do now for 18 years. And I do sales and business development training, work with sales leaders and so forth. But I also do leadership training and development, work with corporate leadership teams, coach, C-level people, that kind of thing. And also do strategic planning. Nice little Venn diagram that intersects. Companies need all three of those things. And oftentimes I'll work in one or more areas with my clients, right? So I'm well equipped to understand exactly what goes on in leadership training. And the same problem exists in leadership training. You have to ask yourself, why don't we have more effective leaders? Oh, you need evidence? Well, let me give it to you. Since 2005 and before, companies like Gallup being probably the leader and the most well-known, have been reporting on the metric of employee engagement for the last 18 to 20 years, and it's hovered between 30 and 35% that entire time. Plus or minus 2 points in the last 2 decades. Why is that? Is it because we don't know how to create effective leaders? Oh no, we know how. I mean, think of the names out there that have been teaching, writing about, consulting on the concept of leadership and creating effective leaders. John Maxwell, Patrick Lencioni, Marshall Goldsmith, Simon Sinek, and the list goes on and on. Mark Sanborn. I mean, I could go over and look at my bookshelf over there and come up with 10 more names very quickly. It's not that we don't know how. Then why has it changed? You go, well, but that's employee engagement. Well, by the way, that's the metric you should care about if you're in leadership. But let me give you this one, as shared in 2018 Harvard Business Review article, in which 65,000 employees were asked, is your manager results-oriented or people-oriented? And by the way, do you think your manager is a good leader? Yes or no? 65,000 people. When it came to, yes, my boss is results-oriented, 14% considered their boss to be an effective leader. 1 in 7? Really? Oh, and you think it's going to get better if they're people-oriented? No, actually it gets worse. 12%. 1 in 8. Oh, but there is good news, by the way, as an aside. If your boss was considered to be both, in this study it was reported that there was a percentage of employees said, wait a minute, my boss is both results-oriented and people-oriented. 74% were considered to be good leaders. 3 out of 4, now we're talking. What percentage said their boss was both? 1%. 1% out of 65,000. You see the problem? It's not that people don't know that there are people out there that know how to create effective leaders. Why isn't the tide turned dramatically in the favor of great leadership in corporate America? In fact, what is the single most common type of leader in corporate America? Say it with me. Micromanager. Yes. How can this be happening? Well, it's because of how we go about training people to be effective leaders. I mean, have you been to leadership training? I have, lots of them. I mean, I do it for a living too. So, I'm one of those guys that has to keep up with the latest and greatest and most effective in order to be able to teach it and train it and develop it with my own clients. I struggle with the same kinds of challenges. How do you get people to change their behavior? Well, one of the problems that exists in leadership training is I want you to think about what it looks like. It's 30,000 foot view. It's the big picture, right? I love to go to leadership training and have the person say, You need to learn to be transformational. Oh, that's helpful. No. You've got to be inspirational as a leader. Okay. No, my favorite? Oh, yes, my favorite. You've got to learn to be your authentic self. You've got to be an authentic leader. Like, great. What does that look like on Monday morning? I roll into work. I'm a leader in an organization. I've got a large group that I'm responsible for. How do you be authentic? Can you give me a methodology? Can you give me tools and tips and ideas about what I actually do day to day to be better at what I do? And people will look at you like, what? I'm sorry? Oh, I said that was my favorite. You know what my real favorite is? It's when people explain the difference between management and leadership and trying to explain, here's what leadership is. Management is doing things right. But leadership, that's doing the right thing. Oh, hang on. Let me write that down. Monday, I know I have no idea what to do differently on Monday. Is there anything wrong with those things? Absolutely not. It's insightful. It's helpful. But like selling, it doesn't really move the needle in terms of making me more effective as a salesperson, or in this case, as a leader. Systemically, the way we approach it, the way we do it, and a whole lot of things that we don't do well at all impact how well and how effective we're able to be as leaders. How can we change the results? I mean, what are the objectives of leadership, for example? All right, I want you to put this in context. What is the objective of a leader? All right, well, it's to be the boss, be in charge, tell people what to do, make decisions, solve problems. No. Your objective as a leader is to transform the potential of your people into real performance. I mean, it's to take the possible and make it into the reality of performance. It's to create a culture of excellence that produces consistently excellent results. It's to create a high performance team. I mean, leadership is about results, just like selling is about results. But yet you go look at the definitions of leadership. It's the activities that lead a company to buy your product or service. Yeah, it's about a series of activities that you engage in order to persuade people to buy your product or service. I'm going to suggest to you that's not what selling is. Oh, I mean, technically, right? That's the definition. Selling is about getting somebody to buy something. But no, that's not the objective any more than the objective is to be the boss or to tell people what to do, that kind of thing. When we don't define explicitly and specifically what we want salespeople or leaders to do, then we run into a problem. In fact, we see these two worlds collide when we take a great salesperson and promote them to leadership. And we absolutely do not change the expectations of what their role is. Selling and sales management are two completely different skill sets, right? Completely different. So we take a great salesperson, we install them as sales manager, and they stumble and they struggle. And, suddenly when as a salesperson, they were just saying, hey, give me a chance. Let me do my thing. Let me exploit my potential. Let me get out and really make things happen. Let me make decisions. Give me some autonomy. Give me the ability to control my own destiny. Treat me like an adult. And then they become a manager, and within 6 weeks, they're scratching their head and they're going, you just can't find good people these days. Well, maybe we should have done a better job of preparing them, teaching them, training them for an absolutely new role with completely different expectations and objectives. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk about what you have to do to change your sales training to make it way more effective. And hopefully the analogy from leadership has helped. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com. or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. I'd love to hire Michael Jordans every time. It just doesn't happen. There are amazing numbers of highly competent, capable, talented, potentially successful salespeople out there. We've just got to develop them. And when your sales training process is designed to get them in the field as quickly as possible with minimal amounts of information that mostly they've forgotten, it doesn't work very well. Welcome back, Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. Great to have you with me as we talk about all the challenges and issues associated not only with sales training, but in this episode, leadership training. And my role in the last 18 years in the company that I have in working with clients has kind of given me a unique perspective of both sales training and leadership training and the challenges that exist with both of them. And it's not because we don't know what we're trying to get to and how to get there, but many times the way we're doing it is completely flawed. There are these systemic problems, and in many episodes of Sales and Training, we discover and uncover many of those issues that do exist. So I've been talking about an analogy between sales and leadership training and how that works. And listen, it all comes down to a very, very simple objective. Whether you're talking about selling or you're talking about leadership, sales leadership, corporate leadership, whatever it is, you're talking about behavior change. And this is one of the reasons why sales training is a bit of a misnomer. I don't care about training. What I care about is learning that leads to behavior change. What I want to do is teach a salesperson or a sales leader the tools, the skills, the techniques, the processes, the systems that will enable them to become effective in the role. And simply providing training, and by the way, that's what a lot of organizations do. If you ask them, hey, do you do sales training? Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me? We have sales training for days. What does that look like? Oh, it's computer-based training, or it's mandatory classes and all this. Do you measure it? Do you manage it? Do you set expectations? Do you review it? Do you coach it? No. Well, then all you're doing, why don't you just hand somebody a book and say, read this book and you'll become a better salesperson? Well, in some instances, that's what companies do, or some version of it. But you know as well as I do, if you could be a great salesperson simply by reading a book, then there would not be any need to invest in sales training per se. It's experiential because behavioral change is experiential. I take my time in sports when I played football. The coach was on the field. They were working you through a progression of learning baseline skills and building on those skills, taking a skill and stacking on top of it. So they would chunk and stack. A really good learning behavior change strategy is to try to break it down into pieces, learn parts of it, then build on top of it until you're good at the whole process. Companies don't do that. They don't have a regimented, standardized, rigorous way of creating behavioral change. And so in the absence of that, we substitute, by the way, we do it on the leadership side too, we substitute sales training. And that sales training does not yield the results that we're looking for. And when it doesn't, probably the subject of a future episode, what do? Hey, we've provided training and our results aren't changing. It must be the salespeople. Well, nope, sorry. It can be, certainly. Salespeople fail. But I wish I had $1 or $2 for every capable salesperson who didn't succeed in one company that they worked in because they didn't get any training, coaching, support, encouragement, etc. And they went somewhere else and got it and turned their entire career around. Oh, and if that would sound like personal experience, you would be absolutely correct because, it happened to me as well. Training, coaching makes a difference if it leads to learning and behavioral change. So let's talk about 4 very specific things that you need to do differently. Grab a pen, grab a pencil, write these things down. Oh, by the way, I can hear some of you going, yes, you're going to give us some conceptual things that is, you're not actually going to get into what I do Monday, different kinds of things. Well, listen, I would love to help. Kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Send me an email. Yeah, we can get into specifics, absolutely. But you begin with the concepts because the concepts are important. There's no question about it. All right. Number one, you need to hire learners. Yeah, I mean, it's a non-negotiable for me in terms of hiring salespeople. If they're not interested in learning, if they can't demonstrate a history and an attitude of learning, getting better, growing, wanting to absorb knowledge and improve their skills and so forth, I'm really probably not interested. Now, people learn in very different ways. I've always been a reader, but you can learn tons today on YouTube videos and webinars and audiobooks and all different kinds of ways and all different kinds of styles of learning. We know that people learn differently, but I'm looking for those kinds of people. Number two, I'm going to set very clear expectations for that learning and development. I'm going to outline how we're going to provide the training and the expectations for absorbing it and changing behaviors, and how we're going to measure that change or observe that change, and how we'll go about doing some things differently. Number three, when you're training, you need to provide context. I mean, for example, in the world of sports, we talk about running a route. Well, context matters. I was a wide receiver, so we talk about how you run routes. You have to know the different routes, what's called a route tree. What is a 1 route and a 2 route and a 3 route? Or if they have names for those routes or combo routes that you run. Yeah, sure, but context matters. What defensive scheme are they in? Are they at the line of scrimmage pressing you, or are they playing zone? Are they playing 2 deep or 3 deep or 1 deep? I mean, if you're a football fan, as I obviously am, you're going to understand those terms. But what I'm trying to say is that context matters. I mean, if you teach someone how to close sales and you don't put it in the context of the entire sales process, identifying decision makers, selling value, doing discovery, et cetera, then I don't care how good of a closer you are any more than I care how good you run routes. If you can't put them into context, if you consistently can't get open because you can't identify a defense, for example, then that's going to be a serious kind of problem. Number 4, what kind of observation and coaching and testing do you provide or create for the salespeople that you're teaching and training? Hey, this is so incredibly important. I mean, we've talked about it in multiple episodes, and it'll come up in future episodes as well. But if your sales leaders cannot coach improvement, behavioral change in salespeople, then the chances that your sales training is effective is almost zero. No, I mean, just putting the knowledge out there is not training. Just providing a monitor and a YouTube video is not training. You need someone to come alongside and explain context and explain when this applies and explain the many variations that exist and how you're going to go about implementing those. This thing we do called selling is extraordinarily difficult. It's why salespeople are among the highest paid individuals in corporate America, because we're playing a competitive game. We're playing against competition, and there is no prize for second place. Listen, you've got to learn to implement effective training that leads to learning and leads to behavioral change. And we'll talk more about that in future episodes. I'll see you then.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.